On this episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem, I talked with Bo McBrayer of BigTimeFlavor.co. That hot box gourmet hot sauce is delicious. I ordered it right after the podcast was finished recording. Bo does fantasy content for Nimble with Numbers, is the lead content creator for DFS with Ball Blast Football, is a co-host of the Chalk Blocked Show, and is just all over the place providing DFS content on the regular. We talked about all kinds of rad stuff, including how Hotbox Batch came about, the interesting way he started playing fantasy football, why he likes writing fantasy football content, our mutual love for the Dallas Cowboys, and so much more. Make sure to give Bo a follow on Twitter at Bo_McBigTime. You can follow me on Twitter at TheCaseyKasem, and the podcast on Twitter at GetReal_pod. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. And now for my conversation with Bo McBrayer. How exciting. I'm so excited that you can be here. Are you so excited, Bo?
I am jacked. I am jazzed, jacked, psyched, all the words you can use.
Well, I'm excited too because I don't know you that well, and I'd like to get to know you, as would everybody that's listening to this podcast right now. And I haven't done one of these in a really long time, and I miss talking to people. So being able to talk to you and kind of just find out more about you is going to be really awesome.
I'm just so excited to get to have you get to know me. That's because I feel like some people on Twitter, they know me too well, and so
right. Well, yeah. I mean,
pull you out of your long streak of not doing this. It's an honor.
I appreciate it. I like the fact that that I don't know that much about you, because it makes it so much more fun to be able to talk to people that I want to know more about. So let's go back to the very beginning of, your existence. And let's fast forward a little bit.
To birth.
Where were you? No. When you were growing up, did you have a relationship with sports? Were you a fan of sports?
It was such an obsession with sports that my family was worried about me because I wouldn't do anything unless it involved sports. From the time I was probably 4 or 5 and I was in T-ball or playing Pop Warner football, I was so obsessed with even professional and collegiate sports at such a young age that my parents were just like, okay, there are other things you can pay attention to. But after a while, they just gave up and they're like, hey, Bo's just the sports kid.
Did you play any sports when you were growing up as well?
I played all the sports up until the point where my athleticism kind of fell behind where my peers were at.
Yeah.
But I played football, baseball, basketball until junior high, and then I was just down to baseball and golf through high school. And I did play on some good traveling golf teams. Played some intramural baseball that was really competitive up until junior college age, and then I pretty much went along with just knowing a lot about sports and not being that good at them.
Well, it's awesome that you know a lot about sports and that you were such a fan at such an early age. Did you have any teams growing up that you were a big fan of, and are you still fans of those teams today?
I can proudly say I have the same fandom as I did when I was a little kid. I am a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan. Shout out Dallas Cowboys fans everywhere, including you, Casey.
Including me. Yeah, for sure. The Dallas Cowboys. So you were watching them at an early age. Do you have a memory that sticks out from when you were younger that is a big Dallas Cowboys moment for you?
I'm 34. I'll be 35 in March. And so when I was 5-6 years old, that was right in the prime heyday of the triplets. Mm-hmm. And so I would actually tune in. I'm a California kid, so it was mostly the 49ers and Raiders were what was on TV every Sunday. But apart from that, it was Dallas Cowboy football on Fox. Every Thanksgiving game was Pat Summerall and John Madden. And I can still, and Emmitt Smith falls into the end zone for a Cowboys touchdown. And like the Pat Summerall just rings through my head. Even to this day, I can still hear those sounds of the games that I love tuning into. And of course, with my whole family being 49ers fans, it was great when they got to play in conference championship games and other primetime games, or back then it was the 1:00 p.m. game on Fox. It was so awesome because the competition, the rivalry it's still alive to this day, 30 years later. It's amazing.
And you were around so many 49ers fans. So how did you become a Dallas Cowboys fan?
pure contrarian hatred. That's really what it comes down to. Is my stepdad, actually, he was best friends growing up with Jeff Stover, who was a defensive lineman for the 49ers back in the 80s with the 49ers dynasty. And so he spent a lot of time around the team, and he was, I mean, as much of a 49ers fan as a person possibly could be. And of course, I mean, I a kid of a divorce my parents divorced when I was 7 or 8. So it was like my stepdad was like, there was that built-in rivalry, even though it was like when I grew up to be an adult, it was like the opposite of that. But when I was a kid, I just wanted to do everything the opposite of him. And so, I mean, it was a combination of me loving the Cowboys, watching the Cowboys win, being on TV so much, and then of course going against the 49ers fan that was my stepdad, who passed away a couple months ago from pancreatic cancer. But it was like that was part of my growing up, was just having a rivalry, like having something that like got my competitive juices flowing, even on a personal level.
That's a great story because, you know, a lot of people's backstories are like mine. I grew up in the Dallas area, so that's why I like the Dallas Cowboys, you know, so it's kind of a boring story, you know. But that's real cool that you're still a fan. I can only guess that you've been going through a roller coaster of emotions because they've been so good this season, except for like last game prior to the one that we just blew out. I say we like I played for them, but you know, yes, we blew out the Falcons. But yeah, how have you felt this season with the Cowboys? Because this is a different kind of season.
So after 26 years of waiting, I mean, they were 10 when they last won the Super Bowl. I was at my best friend's house. I was the only other kid in my hometown that was also a Cowboys fan. He happened to be my best friend. We were the two boys in what 10 years old. We were in 4th, 5th grade. And we're the only 2 Cowboys fans in the whole town. We are both the 2 athletic left-handed kids that were 10 years old wearing Cowboys gear. And we had a Super Bowl party at his house. And man, what is with my backstory? It's like everybody that I grew up watching football with passed away. Like he passed away when he was 19, but it was like that. I still remember that Super Bowl party as a 10-year-old going to his house, and we were the only ones rooting for the Cowboys against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And of course that was the Larry Brown 3 interception game against Neil O'Donnell. But like this season for me, after 26 years of just being disappointed, like having all the expectations in the world and having them dashed at some point or the other during the season, I've been hopelessly optimistic. Like I'm like, this could be it, but I'm so jaded from disappointment that, I mean, you never know. I don't like Mike McCarthy so much as a coach, but I really do believe in the talent that's on this team. It's just I don't want to get my hopes up, but I also do have some underlying excitement that I can't wait to let just explode if we do win it all.
Well, you're more of a hardcore fan than I am because I remember the Super Bowls as a child, but I don't really remember watching them. I remember being that kid running around, like playing with all the other kids and not really paying attention to the game. So I would love to be able to like witness that as an adult and be able to like actually understand what's going on.
I can't wait.
So here's hoping. I don't want to jinx anything. Here's hoping one day in my lifetime I can see something.
I hope the same. I hope the same.
And I could talk to you for days and days about the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm sure not everybody listening to this right now wants to.
They're probably already fed up.
They're like either they've already turned it off or they fast forward through this whole part, which is fine. Do what you got to do. I understand. If somebody was sitting here talking, never mind. We're going to talk about the Eagles. But anyway, love you guys. I want to know, how did you find out about fantasy football?
So I originally thought, because this hasn't been an online thing for that long. If you go back to fantasy football as a whole, probably was invented somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s over in Oakland, which isn't far from me. I'm in Northern California. But I actually did go back and try to find the first time I played some iteration of fantasy football, and it was back in 1998. It wasn't long after that Cowboys Super Bowl win where somebody, I think it was my uncle, my great uncle, who was also my 5th grade teacher. He was like, "Hey, you like math and you like sports, so here's this game that I play with my friends. It's called fantasy football." Where, I mean, back then it was just pick the players, and then they read the box scores on Monday or Tuesday and then put the points together. And of course, there's no flex position. There's no PPR. It was just, okay, did your guy get some yards and a touchdown or not? And it was, I believe it was 5 or 6 starting positions. And they had a rudimentary draft, but it was more closer to DFS style, which is kind of weird, because now that I'm the DFS guy, I look back at that first game that I played with my great uncle back in '98. That was crazy, because I really got into online fantasy football back when I was probably in high school, and then I really got into it in college back in the early 2000s, in 2005 and 6. That was when I was competing against like my professors at Butte Community College. Shout out Aaron Rodgers and Larry Allen. They were share the same alma mater of junior colleges, at least. And I was competing against guidance counselors, or like the class counselors, the ones that pick your classes for you. And then my professors were all in the league together. And that was an ESPN league. That was the first league I remember playing online. And that was the first one that was like, I can actually go back and see, okay, who did I have? I had Larry Allen, Tony Gonzalez, all those guys. And it was, or not Larry Allen, Larry Johnson, the running back for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you could remember anybody that you had on that roster. So that's pretty cool. And your origin story is really cool with the fantasy football too, because not everyone can say I played, with my professors and the counselors and everything else. So that's pretty cool. When did you realize that, like, hey, I'm pretty good at this?
Well, I don't know. I've always had supreme confidence in my own ability.
Got the confidence.
And yes, I've always felt like I've been really good at just analyzing sports. When I was in high school, I was the statistician for the football team, and I was actually kind of a pseudo assistant coach, even though I was a student. But I was alongside the team. I wasn't a good player. I didn't play in high school, but I did have a close connection with the head coach and the defensive coordinator. So we actually we were drawing up schemes. Like, he was having me draw up different types of blitz schemes. So I already understood the game from that side of it. And then when I started playing fantasy football, I was like, oh, this is just like, okay, I can watch film like I do with the team and try to figure this out. And it works for a while, but back then there was very little analysis compared to what we have access to today. Today is insane because everybody has access to a ton of information. It's just about how you break it down.
Yeah, there is so much out there. And it is crazy to see how it was, when you first started with the whole statistics stuff. And when you were in college, were you in college going towards something in the math field, or what was going on there?
No, absolutely not. I was just I went to Butte Community College for 4 years. So that's a 2-year college that I spent 4 years at, because I changed my course of study right in the middle of it. Like, I was one class away from getting going pre-law, going into law school.
Oh, wow.
Like, on the fast track to being somebody in legislature. And I was writing legal briefs for criminal justice students that wanted to be cops, because they couldn't figure out how to write legal briefs. And I basically spent my whole community college career in the law library. And that was like, for me, it was just, I spent all that time in junior college. And then all of a sudden, when I was going to transfer to Chico State, it's a party school. Yeah. I didn't care. And I ended up going into international relations. I studied linguistics. I studied Latin American studies. So I learned how to speak French. I learned how to speak Spanish at a native level. And then I was basically just doing getting the classes done that were easy for me, because I grew up in a little town that was 70% Hispanic. So I already spoke pretty good Spanish. I was like, this is easy. You mean I just have to write a report on a poem that was written by somebody in Costa Rica back in 1790? All I have to do is write a report on it and I get an A? All right, let's go drinking.
I mean, I think that's a lot of people's college experiences, and I'm not going to say that we all have our thing. I mean, I was in college for 7 years. I changed my major. Like, I had 3 different majors. I was bouncing around trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and guess what? I didn't use it. I don't do anything. Which you know what?
Yeah.
But you know what? Whatever. It was an experience. We've got our degree, and we're a happy camper, right?
Well, the story at Chico State is you don't actually get your degree until you wake up in somebody's lawn that you don't recognize.
Oh, okay.
And so that's my story. It's I got my bachelor's in international relations. I had a
Mm-hmm.
minor in Latin American studies. I dropped out of the Spanish and linguistics program before I could get anything put on my degree here that's on the wall. And then I went back to work for Costco because I started work at Costco at 20 years old, and they ended up having a hearing aid apprentice program that I got into, and that's the rest is history. I've been dispensing hearing aids for 7 years, and I'm at the top of my craft for that. And that's my main side. That's my main day job is hearing care.
Okay, I did not know that about you. See, learning something new. And okay, we go to Costco, we see that hearing aid there. My wife's always like, "You need to go over there." So, okay, there you are. Well, that's really interesting. So, how did you go down like that path? How did you decide that that was something you wanted to like do?
Well, both sides of my family were blessed with terrible hearing, so my whole life I was basically yelling at my relatives to get them to understand me. Like my grandmother, who practically raised me because both my parents were working, she had a very severe hearing loss when I was a kid, and then she ended up succumbing to Alzheimer's complications. And I saw that. I practically lived with her during that whole process, and it was heartbreaking because it's one of the worst ways to go. And I was high school, college age when I was going through that. So I was like, that's the worst thing. And then I found out later that one of the leading modifiable risk factors, actually the number one modifiable risk factor besides genetics for Alzheimer's and dementia, is hearing loss. That's like if you don't treat a hearing loss, you're like 400% more likely to develop cognitive decline, and prematurely even that. So like you take genetics out of the play, and hearing loss is what causes that because your brain just shuts down. I was like, holy crap, that's what happened to grandma. And so then my dad, of course, my grandma's son saw the same thing I did. And he was in his 30s, 40s when that happened. And at 48, that dude was first in line getting hearing aids because he couldn't hear squat. And my dad was a professional skeet shooter, and he only wore hearing protection during competitions. So when he was training for competitions, his ears were ringing off the hook, and you'd have to slap him on the back to get his attention because he wasn't going to hear you coming from behind. And so he got hearing aids when he was 48, and he got them from Costco. And he got them from a lady who used to be my front-end supervisor when I was pushing carts and boxing groceries as a young Costco employee. She was my front-end supervisor, and she ended up going into the Costco apprentice program. And the rest is history there because she dispensed my dad's first pair of hearing aids, and I've ended up dispensing his last 3.
Wow, I like that whole circle and how it came around. That's an awesome story. Again, with the awesome stories, I love it. I love it. So how did you find out about the fantasy football writing, podcasting, media kind of thing that's happening now?
So that was more recent, a lot more recent. I have been writing a long time. Like that was one of the things I love to do is just write. And because my complete unhealthy obsession with sports, I have published bylines in the local newspaper back to when I was in 7th grade. I would actually do the write-ups when our traveling basketball team in junior high would go to a tournament, like a big tournament. I would do a write-up on the whole tournament. Like I would stick around for all the games that even the games that we didn't have. Like all my teammates would go out to Denny's for milkshakes and French fries, and I'd be sitting there watching the rest of the games so I could do the write-up on the tournament. And I would submit my article to the paper, and that was my first experience with having an editor just completely obliterate everything I wrote. Here's 13-year-old me submitting an article that I spent hours and hours on, and about a third of it made the paper. So it was my first experience with an editor, and of course now it's just I'm so like frenetically picking on my own writing that it's just I edit my own stuff now. Basically, it's like when I write, it's just so much fun to go back over and over again and pretend it's not you that this came from, to whittle it down to something edible, digestible. And with that background, a couple of years ago, I rekindled my relationship with Twitter. I think I started my account back in 2012, but I mean, going back through my archives, there's not much there between 2012 and 2018 because I just simply didn't have the app on my phone. And I think when it was before COVID, but I think I was just going through a bored period of my life, or just a rough patch in my life. And all of a sudden I was on Twitter more and more often, more as just a fan. I was reading content. I was watching content. So I followed Matthew Berry. I followed all the people that I knew and I wanted to get more information from. And then I just started building more relationships with some of the people that were of like mind, of like interests. And that's kind of where it took off, is that people started connecting with me. And I was surprised because I was probably following 2,000 or 3,000 accounts, mostly fantasy football related. And I had like 220 followers. And like looking back now, it's insane to what's developed over 2 years. It blows my mind, because now it's like there's people that are joining like me, that are following me for the same reason I followed all these other accounts.
Yeah, that is pretty cool to think about. And when you first got back into Twitter, and you were following people and getting more involved in the community, how did you figure out that there was such a big community? Because I mean, I stumble across things all the time where I find other communities, which is crazy to find, like the smallest, like there's like resale communities and marijuana communities and like crazy stuff out there. Right?
Great. Isn't America great?
Yeah. There's just like, and it's just great. Little crafty, little old ladies in the crafting, in their little, and it's just crazy to me that there's like these little pockets of groups of people that are like-minded, like you said. So did it blow your mind when you found out about this?
Not initially. Like I still, like, I look back at some of these bigger accounts that I have never heard of, people that the community holds at such high regard. Like, I didn't know of Mike Tagliere until last year. And apparently he was a rock star for many years on fantasy football Twitter. But like some of these names, if it wasn't if it wasn't Matthew Berry, if it wasn't Matt Harmon, who I followed from the Yahoo, like I wasn't following Matt Harmon through Twitter. I was following him through his work with Yahoo, and I was following Matthew Berry through ESPN. Like I was like, oh, these guys have their actual pinned articles when I pull up my fantasy apps when I'm competing against my friends. And so I was following them, and then I'm making connections with people who are like, oh, check this out. The legend, Graham Barfield just said that. I was like, who the hell is Graham Barfield? And so I'll dig deeper and I'll follow Graham Barfield. And it's an entire rabbit hole of more and more people who are held in high regard in the fantasy community. And now I'm looking at it going, I know all these people. I mean, some of them don't know of me, but I'm familiar with all of them. And it still is crazy to think that I finally got to the end of that rabbit hole, and it's a whole actual family of people that love the sport, love the game, and we might fight, but that's family.
That definitely is family. Yes, we might fight, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's just such a great, tight-knit community. It's so awesome. It's so awesome how many people are involved in putting out podcasts and writing and doing all of that. So what was your first experience with all of that like? Like, do you remember when you first sat down and were like, okay, I'm going to write?
It came after I was just peddling hot sauce to everybody on Twitter. And my writing for fantasy football came after I was bored in the kitchen in January of 2020, before all the COVID stuff hit. And I wanted to recreate this taco sauce that's at the taco place down the street. One of the best places I've ever eaten. And I'm a diehard foodie. Everybody knows this about me. If they don't respect me for my football takes, I understand. But I am definitely the authority on food and flavor, because that's what has been my life more than anything in the world. I was trying to recreate a taco sauce. And what actually came about was more of a hot sauce, more just something you can put on everything. And it was the first batch I made. And I made way too much of it, like way too much. We're talking like a 10-ounce bottle of Tabasco will last me months. And I probably had a gallon and a half of this hot sauce. And so I just went on my Instagram and it's like, who wants some free hot sauce? I have way too much. And people were throwing me Venmo money. I was like, I don't want your money. So I had a gallon and a half of this hot sauce and people are sending me money, and it was like 10:30 at night. And I'm just like, oh my God, I have all this hot sauce. What am I going to do with it? And by 11:15, I had sold through about 4 gallons worth. So wow. I had to make more. And that was the funny part, is my wife was like, oh, you made this hot sauce. And she tried it and she was like, oh, it's pretty good. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna see if anybody on Instagram wants some. And she's like, all right, I'm going to bed. I woke her up like at 11:30. I was like, I have like $300 in Venmo. She's like, from what? I was like, well, not feet pics. It's from my hot sauce.
not today.
Yeah. It's like they want the hot sauce. I'm like, okay, I've had, like, nobody's even tasted this yet besides you and me. And then people started tasting it. They started throwing reviews on Instagram. It didn't even have a name yet. I ended up having to buy hot sauce, the glass bottles, on Amazon, getting them shipped to my house so I could put them in bottles with no labels. And I started, then I was like, okay, I still have so much hot sauce, and now people are starting to get wind of it. Like Twitter got a hold of it when I had a dynasty league on Sleeper that I joined with a lot of the members of the Twitter community. That was one of my first Twitter person-centric dynasty leagues, and it was the Hotbox League. And there you go. That was the Hotbox League. I made a batch of 12 bottles of hot sauce, kept one for myself. Oh. And I sent a bottle to everyone in the league. I don't want to name drop on here, but there was a lot of big names in that league. And it was funny because I sent it out, and at that point I had no labels on it. It was just a simple glass bottle with hot sauce. I shipped it out. It's got their addresses via Twitter DMs, and sent out 11 bottles of hot sauce to my league mates. And Scott Simpson, my partner with Nimble Numbers, he was like, "Oh, this is a special batch for our league." And I was like, "Yeah, I made a batch is 12 bottles, and so that's what everybody in this league got a bottle from the same batch." He goes, "Oh, it's the hot box batch." There's the name of the sauce.
Wow, that's wild. I like that. I like how you came up with that. The whole story is just really cool to hear about, because I do know about it blowing up on Twitter. I remember that, and how. So when that happened, I mean, why do you think people just flocked to that kind of stuff, and why do you think people flocked to your product?
I just think it was the story. I think the story, and then with certain people catching wind of other people liking it. And then when Scott put it out there that it was the best hot sauce he ever tried, then I sold a couple of other bottles through Twitter DMs, and it got a little bit out of control because I couldn't keep up with the address. I had to go back 4 or 5 days in the DMs to find this person's address to print a label and ship it out to them. And I was getting orders from Canada. I'm getting orders from UK. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to ship all this stuff? I don't have a website. I'm nothing. And then the Scott Fishbowl happens. And to Scott Fishbowl 10, I applied to get into the Scott Fishbowl because I heard about it through Twitter as a fan. I was like, I'm not doing any work right now. It's like sent out the application. I got into Scott Fishbowl 10 as a fan. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then somebody tagged Scott Fish himself on a hot sauce post. And Scott Fish, of course, loves hot sauce. He loves habanero everything. And he's like, hey, can you send me a bottle? I was like, yeah. Like, sure, I've heard of you. I've heard of Scott Fish and all that he does. And I was like, huge fan of Scott Fish. And I was like shaking. I was like, I'm sending a bottle of hot sauce to Scott freaking Fish right now. And it's like, I sent him a bottle and he loved it. And he shouted it out on his Twitter during, like, we're talking the busiest time of year for Scott Fish, when he's trying to organize this massive tournament with over 1,000 people in it. And he's taking his time to not only eat my hot sauce, but talk about it on his Twitter feed when everybody's following him. Everybody's like, when's the next drop of emails coming out? And he's like, oh, not now. We got hot sauce news. And that flurry of business is what started the website.
And that's awesome. I love the fact that he was able to kind of help out with that in a way, because like when somebody like Scott Fish tweets out something about you, I mean, boom, it's that Scott Fish bomb. Like,
I think I had 265 followers when he did that. And it was ridiculous. After that, it was just, I was just completely blown away by the outreach and by just his support during that period of time when I knew he was crazy busy. That's still that's up there for me with one of my favorite times in my life, just excitement.
And this podcast could be us just talking about Scott Fish and the Dallas Cowboys, and I would be content with that. I'm not sure everybody else would be, but Scott Fish and the Scott Fish Bowl in general, it's such an awesome event. Like the Scott Fish Bowl was one of those things you just look forward to every year. And you said you found out about it through Twitter. Could you have ever imagined in your wildest dreams that something like that could actually exist?
No, there's no way.
There's no way.
And I first heard about it on Sirius XM. I commute every day, and I used to have a Sirius XM subscription where I just listened to fantasy sports radio all day long. Like it was just hours and hours. And one of my favorite guys is Howard Bender. Still to this day, Howard Bender is one of my guys. And I heard him talking about Scott Fish Bowl. Scott Fish Bowl is back 8 or 9. Scott Fish Bowl 8 or 9, but I didn't know what the heck it was. I just thought it was like, oh, all these experts there. I mean, this was before I was heavily back on Twitter and doing any kind of following. But I'd heard, oh, I'm in Scott Fish Bowl and I'm doing this and that. And it's like, okay, yeah, cool. I have no idea what that is. And then I get back on Twitter and then I see it and I'm like, oh, it's a real thing that you can actually get into even if you're not an expert or not an analyst. You're not working for a giant site. And so that's when I applied and was shocked when I got in as a fan. It was awesome because then I could connect with people like Howard Bender through just being in the same division as a person like that.
And that is the reddest thing, like getting to know people and kind of, and it's like a way of networking, but making friendships too. So it's really cool. It's a really cool event. And if you don't know what the Scott Fish Bowl is, you need to go check it out. You need to go right now. I mean, because next year it's going to be just as awesome as it was this year. And I'm saying was this year because I'm not going to do very well. I'm just not going to do it.
I'm having my best week this week, and I'm 3-6. It's like I'm out of contention already, and I picked like the moment I'm out of contention for points and record, I'm having an incredible week this week.
Of course, that's how it works, right? That's how it works. So Scott Fish Bowl as a fan, I started out in Scott Fish Bowl as a fan too, which I heard about on a podcast, Her Fantasy Football with Brandon Marion Lee, who was on a couple weeks ago, and
I love her.
That's how I got into the Scott Fish Bowl, right? Being a listener. So it's super, super dope that, you heard about it as well through Howard Bender, which is also awesome. So did you listen to a lot of podcasts prior to, dipping your toes in the podcasting world?
Actually, no, I really didn't. I'm kind of old school in that way. I prefer to read articles and look at data on paper or on a computer screen. I'm not a big podcast guy, and I still am not. I mean, I have a show. It's at 10 o'clock Eastern every Saturday night with Scott Simpson called Chalk Blocked. I have a waiver show on Tuesday nights with Sam Wagman. But I'm not a natural podcaster. I think I'm okay on screen, but it's basically just repetition of getting used to being on screen and talking to people. But I've just been a writer and a reader my whole life. And so it's not natural for me to do a podcast or to sit through and listen to one for 30 to 60 minutes or whatever they end up running as. But for me, it's how everybody digests something is different, especially when it's information or it's advice. There's always going to be differing ways to learn something. Everybody's a different kind of learner.
Hey, mine was doing it too. I got 3 over here and they are crazy. So I totally get that. It's again, guys, it's not a real podcast unless there's dogs in the background. So I'm just
2 dogs.
2 dogs. You got 2, I got 3, and yeah. So welcome to the new show. We're gonna interview dogs now. It sounds like so. Oh, now they're quiet. All right. So I got a question for you. Well, they're quiet because you're on mute. So that's why. Right? No, you're good. I got.
My wife and daughter are both yelling at them.
Oh, I got you, man. My wife would be doing the same thing if she was here. She'd be, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I swear, it really isn't. I love listening to podcasts and hearing dogs in the background because I'm like, yeah, those are my type of people.
They're real people.
They're real people just like us. So that's awesome. That is awesome. So dogs make me lose my train of thought anyway. So sort of try to get back on track. And because I was wanting to know, prior to being in the fantasy football space, how are you talking about fantasy football and football? Because I know my friends are like, enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pocket. Working at Costco really helps because I have about 180 to 200 coworkers at all times. And so chances are there's at least a few of them that also play fantasy football. So I was in some work leagues. I was in some of my longstanding home leagues where my Chico State and my Butte College buddies were holding it together. We had keeper leagues. We had your long-standing leagues where everybody gets together one day a year to trash talk and get drunk at the live draft, and so for longest time it was that, and I was just basically building out my own rankings, or I would read preseason rankings on ESPN or Yahoo. I was pretty basic with that. But when you get back into Twitter, there's so many places to get information again. There's so many voices, so we just kind of finding my own voice in that space was kind of a big step, because I felt like I was just as good, if not better, at the actual playing the game as everybody who's talking about it. And I was like, okay, what's the damn difference? If I know how to write and I know the game and I play the game well because I've won X many championships in over a few years, it's like, okay, what's stopping me from being one of these voices?
And so I'm taking it that you're more of a fan of the writing aspect than you are of the podcasting aspect. Okay. A lot of people who are trying to break into the industry, the first thing that they want to do is get their foot in the door by writing an article. What do you think that people can take with them from this podcast, a piece of advice for when they're first starting out trying to put out a piece of content?
It's understanding who you are as a person. When I read something, it doesn't matter who it's from. It could be from a gigantic name that everybody knows. It could be a Matthew Berry article. Everybody knows long intro Matthew Berry articles, love, hate. They're the best there is. They're the gold standard. They're what everybody refers to when they talk about fantasy football writing. And that's basically how I modeled my writing style after the first few times, until I found my own voice. And I was like, okay, my intros aren't going to be that long. They're going to be longer. I'm a very verbose writer. I like to use colorful, floral language, as my wife calls it. She goes, your vocabulary is too floral. She's like, it's like you're coming across as pretentious because you're using too many big words about a football game that's basically played by Neanderthals. I was like, well, you got a point. But that's kind of my style. It's like, it's a Bo article because he's opening with something personal, but he's using language that only Bo uses. And that's kind of what I can say for anybody who's writing a fantasy football article or any piece of literature, is just to understand what kind of person you are, who you want the audience to think you are, and to be true to that. If you stick to that formula, people will enjoy it because it sounds genuine, it comes across genuine, it reads as real.
And finding your voice is very important. You can automatically tell when somebody's trying to be the cookie cutter. This is, I'm trying to follow a certain way of putting out content. Well, everybody's good at something. You just have to find your something.
It's easier to bullshit on a podcast than it is during an article. If you're writing bullshit, people pick it up right off the bat.
Oh yeah, and they have the receipts, right? Because podcast, I'm not gonna go re-listen to hour 124 or whatever of your.
But of course, that's when all my best, most accurate takes come is when I'm on the show, and I can't.
I love it. I don't know if I'm leaving this in or if I'm going to edit it out. I hate editing.
Apparently, nobody's allowed to walk down our street today.
You know what? I've got the whole front of the house like blocked out with like baby gates and stuff because I'm like, I can't right now. You got to. So that might be a new question to start asking is how do you navigate around having dogs and kids or anything else, So, yeah, but that is what you brought up was great about writing and how, Matthew Berry, he has a certain way of writing and like you have your own special way of writing as well. So that's super, super, super awesome. And with more and more content coming out nowadays, we have all kinds of media out there now that you can do podcasting and you can put out YouTube videos and have streams and do all of this jazz. And writing's kind of one of those arts that is, I don't want to say going away completely, but it's not the same as it used to be. So it's really nice to see, a breath of fresh air, like when you're putting out your content and it's your voice and who you are. And it's because it's hard because now, I mean, when I'm writing, I feel like I'm just going through the motions sometimes. But when you're really passionate about it and it feels like you're very passionate about writing. Is there anything else that you would ever want to write about? Other than fantasy football?
Yeah, I like writing about just about anything. I mean, if somebody said, hey, I'm going to pay you or give you some kind of currency, if you want to pay me in bourbon or rounds of golf or sporting event tickets or just cash, I mean, I do have Venmo and PayPal, and you want me to write about something totally random that I'm not familiar with, I will do the research and I will make it the best I can because I just love writing. I love going through the motions of outlining what I'm going to write, researching what I'm going to write, and putting it all together in my way. That's kind of what I love about writing the most is you can build it like a house. You can build your pieces out like exactly how you want it. It's a custom house. Every time you make a piece, that's your custom house. And like that's another kind of homage to my stepdad who passed away. Is he was a custom homes contractor, and he built hundreds of houses. Practically my whole hometown is John Eller houses that he built, and most of them are custom built. Where he would sit down with the homeowners before he builds it, and he helps them put little customized nuances on the blueprints before they even break ground. And that's kind of what I want for each piece of writing is just for that little bit of myself to be just kind of on like my fingerprints on it.
I love that. And it is so cool to just that story. Again, another cool story that you have to go like the background behind all of these things is super dope. So you kind of have your, I guess, hand in a lot of different things. How do you manage to not burn yourself out?
Well, I found that if you understand how many hours of sleep you actually need versus how many you want, you can manage things better. I've been writing for a lot of different outlets this year. During the off season, I did a lot of Dynasty and Devy writing because I love the college game and I love watching the players kind of develop and turn into professionals. And so that's what I wrote about this off season. And then now during the season, I write all about DFS. It's all about that here and now, rapid, instant gratification game. Being able to write for companies like Ball Blast, for Nimble, for all these companies that have given me a shot to project myself and to put my research on paper or on screen. That's been a lot of fun, but it has been a challenge. It has been a time suck. Especially with a person with a family and a day job. It's like, yeah, it's basically like there's an episode of The Office where it's Will Ferrell's character and he's shadow juggling because he left his juggling pins in the trunk of his car, and he's pretending to toss the pins to people who are watching him shadow juggle because he doesn't actually have anything to juggle. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm doing is I'm kind of juggling, but I'm also not really, there's no risk of dropping anything. It just feels stressful sometimes because you're like, if your time management's off even just by a fraction, it could be really bad.
Well, you have so many different, like you said, so many different places have given you a shot and let you put out content, and you have your hot sauce. The hot sauce, when you're doing that and you're shipping all that out and doing all of that, like, what is the process and what did you learn from when you first started doing it to something that you take with you now? Maybe advice for other people that are doing the same thing or similar things that you're doing.
I just got more efficient at doing the same things faster. It was at repetition when I got really busy. Like if I had a lot of orders to fill, it's just fight or flight. You're either going to get it done before you pass out or you're not. And for me, it was just about getting it down to where I could produce enough to just knock it out in a short period of time, get the order shipped out, and then breathe, because it is hectic when especially with the holidays coming up.
Yeah.
We get a lot more orders because people are buying for gifts. That's the fun part too, though, is being able to say, okay, I have 15 orders to ship tomorrow, and I just got off work and I got home at 6:15 p.m. So I guess we're gonna be drinking some iced coffee tonight.
That's how it rolls. That's how it rolls. Yeah, and I just started shipping out stuff, and it's like crazy to me. Like people are like, "Where's my stuff?" And I know people aren't going to be like that towards you because the fantasy football community is a wonderful community where no one's ever
They're
rude.
very understanding, yes.
But yeah, like, so I just wanted to put my own personal touch on that. I don't really have a question. Anyway, I just know that I know shipping can definitely be one of those things where it's like, you got to find the time. You get off of work. We all have, a lot of us have full-time day jobs. So after work, we got to try to fit it all in. And like you said about the sleep thing, the sleep thing is accurate. It might not be healthy, but it's accurate.
It's definitely accurate. Definitely not healthy. But at the same time, it's just that you find times to have energy. That's really all it is you get to know yourself, because you have to understand that this has to get done eventually.
Yeah.
And I've had it where I was just like, supplies were back ordered. Like I couldn't get what I needed to put the orders together. And so I have to go and email or text or DM a customer and say, hey, I mean, I'd really want to get this out to you as soon as possible, but my bottles are back ordered until Wednesday. And so, I mean, that's where you start to see people lose their patience, and then other people are just completely awesome about it, and they're just like, hey, I ordered so many bottles because I like the stuff, and I still have a couple in reserve because I don't want to ever run out.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good feeling, because
such a great feeling.
Like, I was DMing them with dread in my mind, because I'm like, they're gonna be so mad that they're not gonna get their hot sauce very soon.
No, that's awesome customer service too, to be able to reach out to somebody and just let them know what's going on. I hate it when I order something and it's been forever and I'm like, what's going on? Like, hasn't even been shipped out yet. Oh, yes, it has. So that's great. It's great. So DFS, you were talking about earlier, and how DFS is kind of like your baby in season, especially. So how'd you come across DFS, and why did you decide that's something that you wanted to focus on?
Well, I mean, I thought I was really good at it back when I started playing in 2017. That's what I play the most of. Now that I'm such a part of the Twitter community, I have 46 season-long leagues, which is way too many for any human being to have. But back before I joined all these leagues, I would have my 2 or 3 home leagues, and then I would build out a ton of lineups every single Sunday for the main slate. And this year and last year, I got into Showdown slate, and it's been so much fun because you can win a lot of money in one day. You don't have to wait all year. The money comes in right off the bat. Like if you're good, they send you the money and they put it in your account that same day. And there's a lot of appeal to that, the instant gratification of doing something well where even if it's sporadic, like DFS is, it's extremely difficult to win. But when you do win, it's pretty lucrative. Like you can make some good money playing DFS if you're good at it. And that's kind of where I got into the content creation part of it, was like, hey, if I'm winning this based on my system, what if I just share my system? Like what if I say, hey, I do this and I won this much, so people would be interested in that, I think. And sure enough, they are. And getting people to watch our show on Saturday nights, and then to read my articles and Scott's articles, and Ball Blast Patreons just hopping right now, because we had a guy sign up on a Monday morning and win $8,000 on Monday Night Football DFS. Wow. Just by reading my article. And I was like, the dude had one player different from me and he won $8,000.
That's incredible.
I was like,
and also really crappy for you.
I thought I was doing great. I won like $300 or $400 that night. And then I get the tweet that the guy's like, oh, I just signed up. It looks like I paid off.
Oh, now he's going to be riding this wave, thinking that it's always going to be like that. Come on.
Yeah, the best reply to his tweet was, I think it's time to retire, dude.
Yeah, you better hang it up now, because
it's not going to get better than that.
But it does always feel awesome when you hit, even like I play like little small $1 here, $5 there, whatever. But it's really cool when you like double your money and you get your you get $10 back or whatever.
It is literally a drug.
Yeah.
DFS is a drug, and I'm the biggest junkie there is, and I'm friends with too many other junkies, and we're all in cahoots together. We're all giving each other the juice to keep playing and keep pouring money into it, because the money keeps coming back out of it. And you go on hot streaks and cold streaks just like with any other form of gambling, but it's a rush. It's the action that you just, like somebody like me that's hyper competitive, that hates losing more than they love winning. It's just that's what fuels us DFS junkies, is just the action, like being able to sweat it out on a single game slate. Like tonight, in a few minutes, we're going to be 49ers and Rams fans that, like, I hate the 49ers, but tonight I'm going to be rooting for a lot of 49ers.
And that's fun how that works out too. And that's how it is with, yes, I feel you on that. So DFS is one of those things that like has a big following, but it's not as big as, like the Dynasty guys.
Oh, no.
Redraft's huge, right? But is there any kind of league that you're just not a fan of?
No, I don't think I found any fantasy football leagues that I'm not a huge fan of. I found ones that I'm not as good at, which best ball I'm terrible at, apparently. I put in a bunch of money into Underdog this offseason, and I'm catching up a little bit, but I'm going from 9th place to 6th place in a lot of these leagues, and they only pay the top 3 spots. So
you're like trying to climb out and try to get up.
I'm finding out that best ball drafting is super fun, because you're putting little bits of money here and there, and then you look at during the whole season, you see how much you're invested and how much you're not winning. And I've discovered that I'm not very good at best ball.
Yeah, I'm not either. I don't think I've even looked at mine. I know I've got a few. I don't think
I wouldn't do it if I were you.
I'm really scared, but like half the team's injured ananyway.
If you fear disappointment, that's not good. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I fear disappointment. So yeah, I'm gonna back away slowly.
Don't open that app.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's nothing that you really have come across that you don't like. Is there a specific setting that you really enjoy?
I really love Dynasty. Dynasty's such a rush, because in some leagues there's action every day, and some of the best group chats, like league chats, are in Dynasty, because like you can trash talk year round, you can do trades year round, you can jockey for position, you can basically say, hey, this is my child here, my team, and it might suck now. It might suck for the next 2 or 3 years, but in 4 years, my golly, you guys are done for. That's what happened in my home Dynasty League. The first Dynasty League I ever joined, I sucked for 2.5 years. And then through little incremental trades and waiver priority positions, I'm 6-3 this year. I'm on a 5-game winning streak. I'm about to win my 6th straight. I got the Flames next to my team name on the Sleeper app, and everybody just paid attention last week. They're like, what are all these flames next to Bo's team? And like, oh yeah, that's because I won 5 in a row, bitches. and they're like, oh dang, and that because not a lot of them are paying attention to everybody else's team. They're worried about their own, and a couple of them are like, oh dang, Bo, your team is actually pretty good. And I was like, I know, it's shocking, right?
Complete opposite of instant gratification, but
yes.
You got it. But you got it finally. Yeah. So what kind of advice do you have for people who want to play Dynasty, but they are kind of like, I was scared to play Dynasty because I thought, oh man, it's going to be completely different than redraft. I'm not going to be able to handle it. So what kind of advice do you have for people like that?
Patience. It's a patient type. It's a person. The person who's going to win at Dynasty is a person who's patient and doesn't make rash decisions at any point. And of course, we can all go back to our own Dynasty leagues and regret certain trades that we made or certain draft picks that we made. And I have plenty of them, especially in that first league where I traded away Chase Claypool straight up for Eric Ebron. And my excuse was I was highly intoxicated when I made the deal. And I had 3 tight ends on my roster and 2 were on bye and 1 was injured. And so I made a rash decision and traded away Chase Claypool for Eric Ebron, who, I mean, as we all know, Eric Ebron's not good. He's not a good tight end. And I ended up dropping Eric Ebron 2 weeks later after shipping away somebody who's worth at least a 2nd-round pick, probably closer to a late first, to get a body at tight end when I could have just gone to the waiver wire and gotten some schmuck off the waiver wire. And no, I had to make the rash decision. And so don't do that. Don't make rash decisions. Don't make knee-jerk decisions, because it's never going to end up well for you. And you're going to get razzed for years, because Dynasty's forever. They always remember. Everybody remembers every deal because they can just go to the little history tab and find out what happened with this player over every transaction it's ever been involved in. And you're never going to live it down. That's what Dynasty is we're never letting this go.
Well, the people who don't know you can do that are actually going to go start doing that now, so they can razz some people in their leagues. So
perfect.
There you go. And you know, the very first Dynasty league I was in, I'm not in anymore. I went ahead and gave it up, even though I was doing all right. And somebody actually ended up winning after they took over my team. So whatever, good for them. Good for them. They can have. But I remember I made some sort of trade and Sammy Watkins was involved. I got Sammy Watkins first and something. I don't know. There was some stuff involved. So I'm sure somebody can go back and find that information to it. But you know, it happens. Yeah, it happens. Just like in the drunk trading, that'll happen.
Yes.
Sometimes I make some. I'm like, what was I? Okay. Why were you guys paying attention to what do not pay attention to any trades I give you after a certain
sometimes it ends like in Dumb and Dumber. It's like, I can't believe you just did something like that and totally redeemed yourself. It ends up being good. You're just by dumb luck, and you're see, I totally meant to do that.
That's always fun, you know. So, so sometimes it works in your favor and sometimes it doesn't. So trading is another aspect that redraft really doesn't do a lot of versus in Dynasty. So when trading, are you a big trader? Do you enjoy trading? And also, what kind of advice do you have for people when it comes to trading?
I actually wrote an article this off season for Dynasty Vipers about the art of trading in Dynasty. Boom. And the art is be ruthless, be careless, be nasty, be that used car salesman when it comes to trading in Dynasty. You want to squeeze every bit of juice out of that lemon, and that lemon is your opponent's head, like your trade partner's head. You're going to squeeze all the juice out of that lemon. And that's the goal, is get as much value as you can, because every single transaction should be to make your team better. And that's what that whole article is about. It's not about winning a trade, because that can flip on a dime 2 minutes later.
Yeah. Like
I made a trade where I was like absolutely won, and then both of the guys that I got in return got hurt, and one of them ended up being terrible. And you're like, oh, I won that trade. It's like, no, you really didn't, because winning a trade is temporary.
Yeah.
But making your team better is a long-term thing that should be the goal of every transaction, whether it's a waiver pickup or a trade, is does it make my team better? And people forget that too quickly.
I like that. I'm gonna have to check that article out. Something that I did not check out, but I really need to because I have a few of those teams that are like, bleh, and they need to get better. So
It's more about the mind game. Like you want to play the mind games to get you want to study your league mates. You want to find out what makes them tick. What kind of moves do they typically make? Where are they weak? What does their team need? Like that's one thing is you can exploit their team needs because nobody knows their team better than they do. And I know my team intimately, but if I know what they need and I throw a little carrot out there and I'm going to pull a bushel of carrots out from behind them when they're grabbing a single carrot that I'm throwing out there. That's really what it's all about. Is making them think that they won the trade, even if you feel like that's not the case. It's like you want to give them every bit of confidence that they're getting a good deal. Their team is getting better, but in reality, you're making your team better and in the process.
Sneaky. And I haven't been as involved in trading this year. I just haven't. And now you're getting me to want to go, go send some out after this. I think I might have to go look into it.
It's itchier than Poison Oak. Like you get the itch to do dynasty trades and it's like, yeah, Poison Oak. You're just scratching that itch for days. Like I'll spend hours just going through all of my dynasty leagues. I've done way too many. And I'll just go out there and throw out decent offers. And if I'm the one that's leading off with a trade offer, I'm trying to be just shy of insulting. Like I want them to reject it, but I also want them to counter with something that's a little bit more appropriate, but still in my favor.
Right. Because and they could just be like, okay, maybe I'm not valuing this player correctly, even though
Oh,
so
yeah. If they're like, what is this? And I'm like, just send a counter. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, send a counter. It's okay.
It's just like you're petting them from afar. Like it's okay. We're making a deal here.
We're
just
doing
send
this.
a counter. You don't like that? You don't like that? Okay, well, just send me what you like.
What can we? Yeah, what can we do? Yeah. Because trading is so complex because, like you said, you have to kind of get to know how everybody trades and everything. And some people won't send counters, and some people won't respond to trades and stuff. And I've been known to do that every now and then if I get too busy or let it expire.
Those
or
people
whatever.
Also prefer their steak well done, so I usually don't make trades with those people.
You already know, so you're like, I'm not even gonna even try. Yeah. Well, yeah. So besides trading, because you brought up waivers, picking up guys off waivers too, has there been anybody off the waivers that you've gotten this year that you have been impressed with?
This year, it was Elijah Mitchell. That's a great waiver pickup. Actually, the best one in Dynasty waivers was week 2. I picked up Cordero Patterson.
Oh.
And he got hurt this last week, but it doesn't matter because I flipped that $12 waiver pickup in week 2. Cordero Patterson, rode him for 3 or 4 amazing weeks where he scored over 20 points in a half PPR. He was just balls out, just awesome. And I traded him straight up for Rashad Bateman. And Rashad Bateman is one of my top dynasty wide receivers already. I mean, he's finally, people are starting to pay attention to him more, so his value is rising. But I hit it. I hit that trade right as Cordero is hitting his peak value, which I paid $12 on Fab for Cordero, and flipped him for a guy who's worth at least a first round pick, probably 2 now.
And that's crazy because that's a guy that wasn't used correctly and hasn't seen much of anything. And then to see his stats this year, it's crazy. So anything can happen, guys. Anything can happen. And that's another thing about winning trades. If he was on your team from day one and you never let him go, you would have had to have waited.
That was the ultimate. Like I was just saying, it's a mind game. Is I convinced this trade partner that it was a win now move for him. And I had a better record than him.
Hey,
I was like, hey, are you contending this year? I was like, if you're contending, this guy's averaging 20 points a game. And I was like, Rashad Bateman he's been hurt the whole time. We don't even know what he is. And of course, I'm just basically, I already know that I hold Bateman at super high value, but I'm making him sound like, oh yeah, this is a pretty even trade. Like you're getting the guy that's good now, and I'm getting the guy that might be good next year.
Let me just tell you about Dynasty. If you tried that crap with me, it doesn't fly.
Oh, it flies because I
Listen.
don't phrase it exactly like
Okay,
that.
don't phrase, because if you phrase, I hate when people phrase it exactly like that though, because I'm like, look,
Oh,
you
if
acting
they're
like I
phrasing
don't
like
know this
that, they're
crap.
being if they're being blunt like that, then they deserve to get just instant rejected. Like, yeah, I'm not making deals with you.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you kind of like soften the blow. And
Well, no, but when the trade gets done,
yeah,
you shake their hand. You say, "Hey,
yeah,
that's a hell of a deal. Great deal."
great job. It
Both
helped.
both teams feel great about it. It makes everybody better. Everybody's happy, and
Yeah.
that's basically how you sell it. Is like, hey, we made an agreement. That's winning the trade. Is we got a trade done.
Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're doing too much trading, or is there no such thing?
Well, yeah, if you're drunk, it's always too much trading.
There
Don't
you
drunk
go.
trade. Don't do
Yeah.
it.
I don't know. Some people swear by it, but I'm not one of those people. No. But I'd like to just use that as an excuse for every one of the trades I make, because most of the time they don't turn out very awesome.
Oh yeah, that was the mimosa
Yeah.
trade.
Yeah. I don't remember that, but yeah, sure, mimosas. Yeah. So, okay, we're about to like wrap this up. You know, football's about to actually start. We're recording this on a Monday night, but are you one of those people that watches football? Because I've had people on here that, or like, I don't even watch football. Do you still watch football?
Yes, I watch
Okay.
every stinking game. I watch Red Zone during because it's an amazing product. I love watching Red Zone. And so Sundays I'm watching Red Zone all day, and then I'll go back to all 22 and break down each game with the 45-minute version of the game, and at least watch like individual players a lot closer.
Wow.
But Monday Night Football's on. Sunday night, I can't stand the commentators. I mean, I wish it was just Al Michaels and not Chris Collinsworth. So I mute. I'll turn the volume down for Sunday Night Football, and then I mute it completely for Monday night. Or what I've been doing lately is watching the Manning cast because it's at least a little bit entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes that's what you need, is the entertainment factor. It goes a long way sometimes, you know. So, okay. So, Bo, we dove into a lot of the things that you are involved in, but we haven't really like gone into plugging the stuff. So right now, this is your platform. I want you to go ahead, tell everybody who you are, where they can, or who you are, where they can find you, how to speak. Since you know so many different languages, and I seem to not even know one. But yeah, go ahead and plug yourself.
It took an hour and 5 minutes, but we finally got to the existential question of who Bo is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to plug you at the beginning. No big deal. But okay. I mean, at the end, I love to hear who are you and what are you all about?
Who am I? I'm Bo McBrayer. You can find me on Twitter at Bo_McBigTime. You can find my food products at BigTimeFlavor.co. That's home of the world's most deliciously intense condiment, Hot Box Gourmet Hot Sauce, along with Smoke Shack Barbecue Rub. That's Taco Season, Shelby Street Heat Nashville Hot Blend, and of course, everybody's favorite Amigo Seasoning Blend, which is an all-purpose blend that's every food's best friend. So go and check it out, BigTimeFlavor.co. And of course, you can find my writing at NimbleWnumbers.com. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/NimbleDFS, where you can buy lineups that we hand build and get personalized DFS advice. We can actually sit down, like theoretically rub your shoulders and build your lineup with you through messaging. And then of course I'm the DFS I'm the lead content creator for DFS for ballblastfootball.com, which doesn't do articles anymore. It's the writing is the dying art sort of thing, which saves me a lot of time. But my DFS picks are still on the Discord, which is available for any patrons over $10 a month for Ball Blast. And so that's what I've been doing this season, is just a lot of DFS work. And then, of course, you can catch me on Chalk Blocked, which is our Nimble with Numbers DFS Slate Walk show, which is a 2-hour show live on Saturday nights at 10 Eastern. Yeah, 12-hour window to get the information from when we start our show to the time of lock at 1 p.m. Eastern the next day on Sunday. Is we break down the whole slate for DFS purposes, and so that's everybody's favorite thing, is to watch me and Scott just trash talk each other. And mainly my intro is always to to make monologue jokes about Scott.
I love it. I love it. And I'm going to bigtimeflavor.co after this podcast so I can order some stuff because I haven't tried it yet. I'm a bad person, so got to get in on it.
Person, you're not educated yet.
I'm not educated yet, but I'm about to be. So, again, thank you so much, Bo, for coming on. It was a pleasure being able to talk to you. Like, I've wanted to do this for a while, and I'm glad that we actually got to sit down and talk.
The pleasure is all mine.
All right, everybody. Well, I would say come back next week, but honestly, like, my schedule, who knows when it's going to come out. But this one came out whenever you're listening to it. So exciting. Anyway, make sure you guys stay rad.